Rains slammed against the floor-to-ceiling windows hard enough to make the entire executive office feel colder. Kang Min-jae didn't even look up when the woman walked in. "She's late," he said flatly, signing another document. The senior managers standing around him exchanged nervous glances. One of them cleared his throat carefully. "Sir, she arrived 10 minutes early." Min-jae finally looked up, and there she was, black wool coat still damp from the Seoul rain, one hand wrapped around a folder against her chest. Calm eyes. No nervous smile, no awkward bow, no desperation, which already irritated him. Most people entering his office looked terrified. This woman looked tired, like she had bigger problems than him. Min-jae leaned back slowly in his chair. "So you're the replacement my father hired." Amara Bennett nodded once. "For now." The answer caught him off guard. "Not yes, sir. Not thank you for the opportunity. For now." The room got quieter. One of the directors gave Amara a warning look, but she ignored it completely. Min-jae studied her for another second before speaking again. "You worked in corporate law before this." "I did. And now you're applying to be an executive assistant." "That's what the contract says." Something about the way she answered him felt intentional, like she refused to hand him emotional reactions. Min-jae hated that immediately. He closed the file in front of him. "You think you're overqualified? No. Then why does it sound like you don't plan on staying?" Amara held his gaze. "Because jobs end, again. No fear, no performance, just honesty." One of the female executives beside Min-jae shifted uncomfortably. Nobody spoke to Kang Min-jae this directly. Nobody. Not employees, not investors, not women. Especially not women. Min-jae stood slowly from his chair. Tall, sharp suit, cold eyes. Everything about him carried power naturally. He walked toward her until only the desk separated them. "You should understand something before working here," he said quietly. "People who disappoint me don't last long." Amara looked at him for a moment. Then she placed her folder carefully on the desk. "Good thing I'm not here to impress you." A silence fell over the office, so hard it almost became physical. One manager nearly stopped breathing. Min-jae stared at her. Not shocked, interested. And that was worse. Because Kang Min-jae never got interested in people. Especially not employees. But this woman looked at him like she could already see through him. And somehow that annoyed him more than disrespect would have. He gave a cold smile. "Leave." The executives rushed out first like survivors escaping a fire. Amara turned calmly toward the door too. Then Min-jae spoke again. "You're not curious why my father chose you personally?" She paused slightly. Not enough to look nervous, just enough to show she heard him. "I assumed he had his reasons. And you didn't ask?" "No, why not?" Finally, she looked back at him, because powerful men usually tell you what they want eventually. Then she walked out. And for the first time in weeks, Kang Min-jae smiled. Not warmly, not kindly, but genuinely. 3 floors below, Amara stepped into the empty elevator and finally exhaled. Her fingers trembled slightly as the doors closed. Not from fear, from anger. Because seeing the Kang Group logo everywhere felt like reopening an old wound she had spent years trying to bury. Her mother's face flashed briefly in her mind. Hospital lights, unpaid bills, that last exhausted phone call. They knew the project was dangerous, Amara. She pushed the memory away fast. Not now. She needed this job, at least long enough. The elevator opened again. A young employee rushed in at the last second, slightly out of breath. "Oh, sorry," Amara moved aside politely. The girl looked at her ID badge and immediately froze. "You're the new executive assistant?" "Yes." The girl looked horrified. Amara almost laughed. "That bad?" The employee lowered her voice instantly. "Listen, people don't stay with Director Kang long. How long did the last assistant last?" The girl hesitated. 8 days. Amara blinked once. Before quitting? Before crying in the bathroom and disappearing. That actually made Amara smile a little. The girl stared at her carefully. "You're not scared?" Amara thought about it, honestly. Then shrugged. "I've survived worse men than him." The elevator doors opened again. The girl stepped out slowly, still looking confused. Meanwhile upstairs, Min-jae stood alone near the glass windows overlooking Seoul. Rain blurred the city lights into streaks of gold and white. His phone buzzed. "Father." His expression changed instantly. Cold again. He answered without greeting. "You hired her without consulting me." Chairman Kang's voice remained calm. "She's competent. She's hiding something." There was a pause. "Interesting," his father replied. "You noticed that quickly." Min-jae's jaw tightened slightly. "You knew already. I know many things." There it was, that same manipulation wrapped inside fake wisdom. Min-jae hated it. "She won't last," he said. But his father sounded almost amused. "No," Chairman Kang said quietly. I think this one will. The call ended. Min-jae stared at the dark phone screen for several seconds. Then his eyes drifted back toward the rain, toward the elevators downstairs, toward her. For reasons he didn't understand yet, he wanted to see how far she'd go before breaking. That night, Amara sat alone inside her tiny Seoul apartment surrounded by unpacked boxes. The place barely looked lived in. One lamp, one blanket, one suitcase near the wall. Her phone buzzed on the table. Unknown number. She answered carefully. Yes? Did you meet him? Amara's expression hardened slightly. Yes. And she looked out the small apartment window. He's exactly what they said. Cold, controlled, emotionally dangerous. But there had been something else too. Something quieter underneath all that arrogance. Something tired. Amara hated herself a little for noticing. You remember why you're there? The voice asked. That snapped her back instantly. Her eyes moved toward the old photograph sitting beside her suitcase. Her mother smiling beside a younger version of Chairman Kang during an overseas company event years ago. A picture taken before everything collapsed. Before the deaths. Before the lies. Before the cover-up. Amara swallowed slowly. I remember. Good. Don't let him distract you. The call ended. But the words stayed there. Don't let him distract you. Amara leaned back against the couch and closed her eyes briefly. Because the truth was, Kang Min-jae already had, and she had only known him for one day. The next morning, the entire executive floor fell silent when Amara arrived exactly at 6:30 a.m. Everyone stared. One employee whispered under his breath. She came back? Another muttered. She doesn't know yet. Amara ignored all of it and walked calmly toward her desk. Then she noticed the mountain of files sitting there, stacked intentionally high. Petty, childish, deliberate, a test. She almost smiled. Minutes later, Min-jae stepped out of his office holding coffee. He slowed slightly when he saw her already working. You're early. Amara kept reading the documents. You're observant. His eyes narrowed. Most people scrambled to please him. She talked to him like an equal. Like his money didn't matter. Like his name didn't matter. And strangely, that irritated him enough to become addictive. He stepped closer. I gave those files to 3 departments already. Nobody finished organizing them. Amara flipped another page. They were organized badly. Min-jae stared at her, then laughed once under his breath. Short, unexpected, real. And the entire office quietly panicked, because Kang Min-jae never laughed. Ever. Amara finally looked up at him. What? But Min-jae just watched her carefully before speaking. You really don't know how dangerous this place is yet. Amara held his gaze. No, she said softly. I think I do, and for the first time in a very long time. Kang Min-jae felt something unfamiliar crawl underneath his skin. Not attraction, not yet. Something worse. Curiosity. The first real fight happened 4 days later, not screaming, not dramatic, which somehow made it worse. Min-jae had called an emergency executive meeting at 7 in the morning after discovering one of the company's luxury hotels was bleeding money through illegal internal contracts. People sat around the conference table looking terrified. Nobody touched the coffee. Nobody breathed too loudly. And at the center of it all sat Kang Min-jae in a black suit, flipping through documents with the kind of silence that made grown men sweat through their shirts. One executive finally tried speaking. Sir, if we delay the audit until next quarter, we can manage public perception more carefully. Min-jae tossed the file across the table, so hard it slammed into the man's laptop. Did I ask for public relations advice? The room froze. The executive immediately lowered his head. No, Director Kang. Min-jae leaned back slowly, then stopped talking. Amara stood near the far wall taking notes quietly, watching, learning, and unfortunately, noticing things she didn't want to notice. Like how exhausted he looked beneath the sharpness, the faint shadows under his eyes, the way he kept flexing his hands slightly like he hadn't slept. A man running entirely on control. One manager attempted another explanation. Min-jae cut him off instantly. You knew about the false invoices. We were still investigating. You were hiding them. No, sir. You think lying becomes smarter when you whisper it? Silence again. Heavy silence. The kind that slowly crushes a room. Then suddenly, Amara spoke. Maybe they were afraid. Every head turned toward her immediately. One executive actually closed his eyes like she had just signed her own death certificate. Min-jae looked at her slowly. Excuse me? Amara set her tablet down calmly. You asked why they hid the problem. I know why. No, she said evenly. You know they hid it. That's different. Nobody moved. Nobody even blinked. Min-jae's voice dropped colder. You think I create fear. I think everyone in this room is more afraid of disappointing you than solving problems. A dangerous silence followed that. Because she was right. and everybody knew it. Min-jae stood. The movement alone made several executives tense. He walked toward her slowly until they stood only a few feet apart. "You've been here less than a week," he said quietly. "And suddenly you understand how I run my company?" Amara met his eyes without hesitation. "No, but I understand people." "And what exactly do you think you understand about me?" That question lingered between them longer than it should have. Amara could feel everyone watching, waiting, terrified. But she answered honestly anyway. "I think you confuse intimidation with leadership." The room died, completely. One manager looked physically ill. Another discreetly reached for water with shaking fingers. Min-jae just stared at her, his face unreadable. Then unexpectedly, he smiled. Not pleasantly, but dangerously. "Everybody out." Chairs moved instantly. Executives escaped the room so fast it almost became embarrassing. Within seconds only Amara and Min-jae remained. The door closed behind them softly. And suddenly the room felt much smaller. Min-jae loosened his cuffs slowly. "You enjoy challenging me." "No, you do." Amara folded her arms. "I enjoy honesty." "That wasn't honesty. That was disrespect." "No," she replied softly. Disrespect would have been saying it in front of investors. Something flickered briefly across his face. Annoyance. Interest. Maybe both. He stepped closer. "You think because my father hired you, you're untouchable?" "I think your father hired me because nobody else tells you the truth." That hit something. She saw it immediately. A tiny shift in his expression, gone almost instantly. But there. Min-jae looked away first, toward the windows, toward the city. "You know what your problem is?" he asked quietly. Amara waited. "You look at people like you can already see the worst parts of them." Her voice softened slightly. "And you hate that I might be right." For several seconds, neither of them spoke. The tension didn't even feel professional anymore. It felt personal, dangerously personal. Then Min-jae laughed under his breath again. Low, disbelieving. "You're either very brave," he murmured, "or very stupid." Amara picked up her tablet calmly. Still employed, though, and somehow that almost made him smile again. Later that evening, rumors spread through the company like wildfire. She argued with him. Inside the boardroom. And survived. Employees started staring at Amara differently after that. Not with pity anymore. With curiosity. Some even with respect. Which made Yoon Soo-jin furious. She arrived at Kang Group headquarters the next morning, dressed like she belonged on a magazine cover. Cream-colored coat. Diamond earring. Perfect posture. Every employee bowed instantly when she walked through the lobby. Because everybody knew who she was. The woman expected to marry Kang Min-jae. Or at least, the woman who still believed she would. Amara looked up briefly from her desk when Soo-jin approached. Their eyes met immediately. And women always knew. Especially women like Soo-jin. She smiled politely. "You're the new assistant, Amara Bennett." Soo-jin glanced around the office slowly before lowering her voice. "You should know Min-jae gets bored of people quickly." Amara returned to typing. "I'm not here to entertain him." That answer irritated Soo-jin instantly. "You're confident." "No," Amara replied. "Just busy." The subtle dismissal landed perfectly. Soo-jin's smile tightened slightly. Before she could respond, Min-jae's office door opened. He stepped out while reading something on his phone. But the moment he saw Soo-jin, his expression cooled even further. "You didn't tell me you were coming." "You stopped answering calls. I was working." Soo-jin glanced toward Amara briefly. Clearly, Min-jae noticed the look immediately. His jaw tightened. "Don't start." "Interesting," Soo-jin murmured softly. "You're defending an assistant now." Amara quietly stood. "I can leave if this is personal." "No," Min-jae said immediately. Too quickly, all three of them noticed it. A strange silence followed. Soo-jin looked between them carefully now, observing, calculating. Then she smiled again. "Oh," she said softly. Now she understood, not romance, not yet, but attention. And for a man like Kang Min-jae, attention was dangerous. Especially when given willingly. Soo-jin stepped closer to Amara. "You should be careful," she said pleasantly. "Men like Min-jae don't fall in love." Amara held her gaze. "Good thing I'm not trying to make him." Min-jae looked at Amara then. Really looked at her. And something inside his chest shifted in a way he genuinely didn't like. Because she meant it. She truly didn't want anything from him. Not status. Not money. Not validation. Nothing. And somehow that made him think about her constantly. That night Min-jae couldn't sleep. Again. Rain tapped softly against the penthouse windows while Seoul glittered below him. His whiskey sat untouched beside the couch. His phone buzzed. A text from his father. "Watch her carefully." Min-jae stared at the message with narrowed eyes, then typed back, "Why did you hire her?" No response came, which irritated him more. He tossed the phone aside and leaned back. But instead of thinking about work, he kept thinking about Amara. Her voice, her calmness, the way she never rushed to fill silence. Most people performed around him. She didn't. And he couldn't decide whether that fascinated him or threatened him. Meanwhile, across the city, Amara sat at her small kitchen table, surrounded by old documents. Company reports, insurance records, newspaper clippings. Her mother's name appeared 3 times. Lena Bennett. Every single file connected back somehow to Kang Group's overseas construction division from years ago. And every trail eventually disappeared. Covered, buried, erased except for one signature, Kang Min-jae. Amara stared at it for a long time, then leaned back slowly. No, she whispered to herself. Because part of her already knew something wasn't adding up. The dates felt wrong, the timelines felt manipulated. And deep down, she didn't believe Min-jae was cruel in the way truly evil people were cruel. Damaged? Yes. Controlling? Definitely. Lonely? More than he realized. But not heartless, which complicated everything. Her phone buzzed suddenly. A message from an unknown number. Leave Kang Group before you get too close. Amara's stomach tightened instantly. Then another message appeared. Your mother made the same mistake. Her blood ran cold, and before she could think, another message came. This time he won't save you. Amara barely slept after the messages. Every sound outside her apartment made her tense. At one point, around 3 in the morning, headlights flashed briefly through her curtains, and her chest tightened so fast she almost reached for the kitchen knife beside the sink. But the car kept driving. Still, the feeling remained that somebody was watching. By sunrise, her eyes burned from exhaustion, yet she still arrived at Kang Group before almost everyone else. Because fear had never stopped her before, and she refused to let it start now. She had just stepped off the elevator when she noticed Min-jae already standing near her desk. Coffee in one hand, phone in the other. His expression immediately shifted when he saw her face. You look terrible. Amara set her bag down carefully. Good morning to you too. You didn't sleep. Neither did you, she almost said. Instead, she opened her laptop calmly. What do you need? Min-jae didn't move. Something about her felt different this morning. Quieter, tenser, like she was carrying something heavy alone. His eyes narrowed slightly. Did something happen? Amara kept typing. No, a lie. And somehow he knew immediately. Before he could push further, another executive hurried toward them nervously. Director Kang, the investors from Tokyo arrived early. Min-jae's attention shifted instantly. I'll be there in 5 minutes. The executive nodded and rushed off. But Min-jae still looked at Amara. You're unusually bad at pretending everything's fine today. That almost made her smile. Almost. Maybe I'm learning from you. For a second, he just stared at her. Then quietly, that's not a good thing. And before she could respond, he walked away, leaving Amara strangely unsettled. Because it was the first honest thing he had said to her about himself. The Tokyo meeting became a disaster by noon. Not financially. Personally. One of the older investors made the mistake of speaking to Amara like she wasn't in the room. She's American? The man said it in Korean, assuming she wouldn't understand. Min-jae continued reading documents silently. Another investor chuckled lightly. That explains the attitude. Amara kept organizing files without reacting. Years ago, comments like that would hurt. Now they mostly exhausted her. But then the first investor spoke again. She's attractive, though. Director Kang always did like unusual women. The room shifted awkwardly. One executive looked horrified. Another stared directly at the table. And slowly, Min-jae lifted his eyes. The temperature in the room changed instantly. What did you say? The investor laughed nervously. I was joking. No, Min-jae replied calmly. Repeat it. Nobody moved. Even Amara looked up now. The investor forced another smile. I only meant, you spoke about my employee like she was entertainment. His voice remained quiet, which was always worse. The investor swallowed. I meant no disrespect. Min-jae closed the file in front of him. Then you should have acted like it. The silence afterward felt sharp enough to cut skin. Amara watched him carefully now, because this wasn't performance. He was genuinely angry. For her. And somehow that complicated things more than cruelty ever could. The meeting ended 20 minutes early. Nobody complained. Afterward, Amara followed Min-jae into his office carrying documents. You didn't need to do that. He loosened his tie slightly. Yes, I did. I can handle comments like that. I know. His answer came fast. Too fast. He turned toward the windows before continuing. That doesn't mean you should have to. Amara went still for a second. The words landed somewhere deeper than she wanted. Because nobody had defended her like that in a very long time. not without wanting something afterward. But Min-jae looked almost irritated by his own reaction. Like protecting people wasn't natural for him anymore. Amara placed the files down carefully. Thank you. He glanced at her briefly, then away again. You're welcome. The moment stretched strangely between them. Soft, uncomfortable, real. Then suddenly his phone rang. His expression darkened immediately the second he saw the caller. Father. He answered without greeting. What? Even Amara noticed the change in his voice. Cold became colder. Chairman Kang spoke loudly enough through the phone that parts of it carried across the room. You embarrassed international investors today. He insulted my employee. He insulted a woman you'll replace next month. Min-jae's jaw tightened sharply. Amara pretended not to react. But inside, something twisted painfully. Chairman Kang continued. You're becoming emotional. No, Min-jae replied quietly. I'm becoming tired. A silence followed. Then his father spoke again. Bring Miss Bennett to dinner tonight. Min-jae frowned immediately. Why? Because I invited her. The line disconnected. Min-jae stared at the phone for several seconds before lowering it slowly. Amara folded her arms. I'm guessing that wasn't optional. His expression remained unreadable. My father doesn't invite people casually. That's comforting. For the first time all day, the corner of his mouth almost lifted. Almost, then he sighed softly. You don't have to go if you are uncomfortable. Amara studied him carefully. That surprised her. Because most powerful men never gave women choices once control entered the conversation. But Min-jae did, even if awkwardly, even if he barely realized it himself. I'll go, she said finally. His eyes held hers for a moment longer than necessary. Then quietly, you should be careful around him. That caught her off guard. You're warning me about your own father? Something dark crossed his face briefly. You don't know him. Neither do you, she thought. Not really. That evening, rain covered Seoul again. The Kang family estate sat above the city like something cold and untouchable. Massive gates, stone walls, perfect silence. Amara stepped out of the car slowly, taking in the enormous mansion ahead. Min-jae walked beside her up the steps. You look nervous. I'm deciding whether your family is rich or villain rich. A quiet laugh escaped him unexpectedly, real enough that even he seemed surprised by it. You're impossible. That's becoming your favorite sentence. Inside, the mansion felt less like a home and more like a museum designed by emotionally unavailable billionaires. Everything expensive, nothing warm, a house built to impress strangers. Chairman Kang waited inside the dining room, older, sharp-eyed, perfectly controlled. The moment he saw Amara, something unreadable flickered across his face. Recognition. Gone instantly, but she caught it. Miss Bennett, he said smoothly. Finally. Amara bowed politely. Thank you for inviting me. Chairman Kang gestured toward the table. You look a lot like your mother. The words hit like a slap. Min-jae looked between them immediately. Amara's heartbeat stumbled once. You knew my mother, Chairman Kang smiled faintly. Years ago, too calm, too prepared. Min-jae slowly turned toward his father now. You never mentioned that. There are many things I never mention. Dinner began quietly after that. Too quietly, Chairman Kang asked Amara careful questions about Chicago, work, her education. But underneath every word, she felt it. Observation. Like he was measuring her reactions constantly. Then midway through dinner, Chairman Kang suddenly asked, Why did you really come to Seoul? The room stilled. Min-jae's eyes shifted toward her immediately. Amara set down her glass carefully. For work, Chairman Kang smiled slightly. That's not what I asked. The tension became immediate. Heavy Min-jae leaned back slowly. Father, but Chairman Kang ignored him completely. His attention stayed on Amara. And suddenly she understood something terrifying. This man already knew. Maybe not everything, but enough. Enough to watch her closely. Enough to test her. Enough to become dangerous. Amara met his gaze steadily. People come to Seoul for new beginnings. Chairman Kang's smile widened just slightly. Do they? Before she could answer, Min-jae interrupted coldly. She's not one of your board members. Stop interrogating her. Another silence. Different this time. Sharper. Chairman Kang looked at his son with mild amusement. You've become protective very quickly. Min-jae's voice hardened instantly. No. I've become observant. But Chairman Kang only smiled again. And somehow, that smile frightened Amara more than anger would have. Because it looked exactly like the smile of a man who already knew how the story ended. Later that night, Min-jae drove Amara home himself. Neither spoke much at first. Rain moved softly across the windshield while Seoul lights blurred around them. Then finally, my father made you uncomfortable. Not a question. Amara stared out the window. Your father makes everybody uncomfortable. That's true. She glanced at him briefly. You really don't trust him, do you? Min-jae's hands tightened slightly on the steering wheel. For several seconds, he said nothing. Then quietly, when I was 14, my mother tried to leave him. Amara looked at him fully now. She died 2 weeks later. The air inside the car changed instantly. Not dramatic, just heavy, human. Min-jae kept his eyes on the road. The official story was suicide. But the way he said it, he didn't believe it. Maybe he never had. Amara's chest tightened unexpectedly. Because for the first time, she stopped seeing Kang Min-jae as just a ruthless billionaire, and started seeing the lonely boy still trapped underneath him. The car stopped outside Amara's apartment building just after midnight. Rain still fell softly across the windshield. Neither of them moved immediately. Min-jae sat there with one hand resting against the steering wheel. Eyes distant now, like regretting what he had just revealed. He wasn't a man who talked about pain. He buried it, controlled it, locked it behind money and silence. But tonight something had slipped through the cracks. Amara looked at him carefully. You think your father killed her? It wasn't phrased like a question. Min-jae gave a humorless smile. I think my father destroys anything that stops obeying him. The honesty in that hurt more than anger would have. Amara looked down briefly. Because suddenly this wasn't simple anymore. The lines were starting to blur. She had come to Seoul believing the Kang family existed on one side, and her mother on the other. Victims and villains. Good and evil. But reality felt uglier than that, more human, and somehow that made everything heavier. Min-jae finally looked at her. You should quit. That surprised her. This job. My father. This company. His jaw tightened slightly. You should leave before you get trapped in it. Amara studied him carefully. You sound trapped. Something flickered across his face. Gone almost instantly. Then he looked away again. I learned too late. For a second, neither of them spoke. The tension between them had changed now. Less sharp, more dangerous. Because emotional intimacy was beginning to appear where hostility used to live. And that terrified both of them. Amara reached for the door handle slowly. Good night, Min-jae. His eyes lifted slightly at the sound of his name. Not Director Kang, not Sir. Min-jae, soft, human. She stepped out before he could respond. But he stayed parked outside her building long after she disappeared inside. The next few weeks changed the entire atmosphere at Kang Group. People noticed it first in small ways. Min-jae stopped exploding during meetings. Not completely, but enough for employees to whisper about it. Executives who once avoided eye contact now spoke more openly. Departments became more efficient. And somehow, Amara's presence sat quietly at the center of all of it. She challenged him constantly, corrected him sometimes, ignored his intimidation tactics entirely. And worst of all, he was starting to listen to her. One afternoon, during a brutal finance meeting, an executive accidentally spilled coffee across several important contracts. The poor man looked seconds away from fainting. 6 months ago, Min-jae would have humiliated him publicly. Instead, he simply sighed and handed over napkins. Clean it before it stains. The entire room stared in shock. After the meeting ended, one manager whispered to another. She changed him. Unfortunately for Min-jae, he had started realizing that too. Later that evening, Amara sat alone reviewing archived company files when she found it. A name. David Bennett, her mother's brother. The document showed he had worked briefly with Kang Group's overseas division years ago. But according to family records, her uncle had died before that project even officially existed. Amara frowned immediately. Something wasn't right. She kept reading. And then her blood ran cold. Because attached to the file was a classified payment authorization signed directly by Kang Min-jae. The date matched the year her mother died. Her breathing slowed. No. She stared harder at the document. The payment had gone to a private security company involved in the overseas construction disaster. The same disaster her mother spent years trying to expose. And Min-jae approved it. Her chest tightened painfully. Every instinct told her there had to be more to the story. But emotions didn't care about logic in moments like that. All she could see was his signature, his name, his family. The office suddenly felt too small, too warm. She grabbed the document and walked quickly toward Min-jae's office before she could lose courage. He looked up immediately when she entered. One glance at her face and his expression sharpened. What happened? Amara dropped the file onto his desk. You tell me. Min-jae frowned slightly and opened it. The second he saw the signature, something shifted behind his eyes. Recognition, then tension. Amara's voice came quieter now. You signed this. He kept reading silently. Yes. The answer hit harder than she expected. No denial, no confusion. Just yes. Amara folded her arms tightly across herself. That security company was connected to the project that killed people. Min-jae looked up slowly. Who told you that? My mother died trying to expose that project. The room went completely still, and for the first time since meeting him, Kang Min-jae genuinely looked shaken. What? Amara laughed once softly. But there was no humor in it. Now you're surprised. Your mother was involved in Haedong construction? She was an interpreter for the overseas negotiations. Min-jae stared at her, like pieces were rearranging themselves inside his head. What was her name? Amara Bennett. The color drained subtly from his face. He knew the name. That terrified her instantly. You remember her. His silence answered everything. Amara stepped back slightly. Oh my God, it's not what you think. That's what people say right before the truth gets worse. Min-jae ran a hand through his hair roughly, frustration flashing across his face now. You don't understand what those documents were. Then explain them. I can't. That broke something. Amara looked at him in disbelief. You can't, or you won't. His voice hardened. There's a difference. No, she snapped quietly. Not when people died. The words hung heavily between them. Min-jae looked genuinely angry now. Not at her. At himself. At the situation. Maybe at the past. I signed hundreds of authorizations during that period, he said. My father controlled the entire overseas division. I was handling legal approvals without access to full operations. But your name is still there. Yes, the honesty of it hurt. Because he wasn't trying to escape responsibility completely, and somehow that made it worse. Amara's eyes burned suddenly, not from sadness, from exhaustion. She was tired of grief following her across countries. Tired of powerful men standing near destruction while pretending their hands stayed clean. You knew people got hurt. His jaw tightened sharply. I knew after. And you stayed. That landed hard, because it was true. Min-jae looked away first, and in that moment, Amara saw something she had never seen in him before. Shame. Real shame. Not ego, not irritation, guilt. I was 24, he said quietly, and my father convinced me the situation was contained. Amara shook her head slowly. You still chose him. The words sliced deeper than yelling ever could. For several seconds neither moved. Then finally Min-jae spoke again. You should hate me. The quietness of it made her chest ache unexpectedly, because he sounded like a man who already hated himself enough for both of them. Amara grabbed the file from the desk. I'm resigning. His head lifted instantly. No. The answer came too fast. Too emotional. She noticed immediately. You don't get to decide that. You can't leave right now. Watch me. Amara turned toward the door, but his voice stopped her again. Soft this time. Almost rough. Amara, she froze, because he had never said her name like that before. Not coldly, not teasingly. Like it mattered. When she looked back, the expression on his face nearly destroyed her resolve. Not arrogance, not control. Fear, real fear. And suddenly she realized something terrifying. Kang Min-jae wasn't afraid of losing an employee. He was afraid of losing her. Amara still left. Not dramatically. She didn't scream. Didn't cry in front of him. Didn't wait for him to stop her. She simply walked out of his office, carrying the file against her chest, while every employee on the executive floor pretended not to stare. But they all felt it. Something had happened. Something bad. Min-jae remained inside his office for almost an hour after she left. No meetings. No calls. No movement. Just silence. And that terrified his staff more than yelling ever did. Because Kang Min-jae only became quiet when something hit him personally. By the time Amara reached her apartment, Seoul's evening traffic had turned the city into rivers of red brake lights and rain reflections. Her head hurt. Her chest hurt worse. She dropped her bag onto the couch and stood there for a long moment staring at nothing. Because this wasn't supposed to happen. She wasn't supposed to care about him. Not after finding the documents. Not after confirming his connection to the project. Not after hearing the guilt in his voice. And yet, some stubborn part of her still believed there was more he wasn't saying. That was the dangerous thing about emotionally damaged people. Sometimes you could feel their sincerity even while they were breaking your heart. Her phone buzzed suddenly. Min-jae. She stared at the screen until it stopped ringing. Then it buzzed again and again. Finally, she answered. What? Silence for a second. Then his voice. Quiet. Don't resign yet. Amara laughed softly in disbelief. That's your opening line. I'm serious, so am I. Another silence. She could hear faint city noise behind him. Car engines, wind, movement. Where are you? She asked before she could stop herself. There was a pause. Outside. Her stomach tightened instantly. Amara walked toward the window carefully and pulled the curtain aside. And there he was, standing beside his car in the rain. No umbrella, no bodyguards, just him, looking up toward her apartment building like a man who didn't know what else to do. Something inside her chest twisted painfully. Min-jae, I need you to listen to me. She closed her eyes briefly. This isn't a movie. You can't stand in the rain and expect trauma to become romantic. To her surprise, he let out a small, tired laugh. I know. Then go home. I can't. The honesty in his voice made her grip the curtain tighter. Down below, he leaned against the car slightly, exhausted in a way she had never seen before. I didn't know your mother died because of that project, he said quietly. If I had known. What? Amara snapped softly. You had stopped your father? Yes. The answer came instantly. No hesitation. And for some reason, she believed him. That was the problem. Tears burned suddenly behind her eyes, frustrating her immediately. Because life would have been easier if he were simply cruel. Simple villains were easier to hate. But Kang Min-jae was something messier. A man raised inside corruption so long he no longer knew where his father ended and his own guilt began. You still signed the papers, she whispered. Below her, he lowered his head slightly. I know, no excuses, no manipulation. Just guilt. Amara swallowed hard. You should go. But this time his voice changed slightly. Not cold, not controlled, almost vulnerable. I don't know how. That silence afterward hurt more than the argument itself, because for the first time since meeting him, Kang Min-jae sounded emotionally lost. And somehow, that was the exact thing she had been trying not to care about. The next morning, Chairman Kang summoned Min-jae to the family estate. The atmosphere inside the mansion already felt tense before a single word was spoken. Chairman Kang sat near the fireplace, drinking tea calmly, while Min-jae entered. You're becoming reckless. Min-jae stayed standing. You had her investigated. I investigate everyone. She's not your enemy. Chairman Kang smiled faintly. That's where you're wrong. Min-jae's eyes hardened immediately. What does that mean? Instead of answering directly, his father set the teacup down carefully. Amara Bennett was smarter than you realize. The mention of Amara's mother instantly sharpened the room. Min-jae stepped forward slightly. What are you hiding? Chairman Kang sighed softly. Your generation always mistakes curiosity for intelligence. Answer me. But his father only studied him quietly for a moment. Then, you're emotionally compromised. Min-jae laughed once under his breath, cold, disbelieving. You spent years turning me into a weapon, he said. Now suddenly emotions concern you. Chairman Kang's expression barely changed. She's distracting you from important things. No, Min-jae replied quietly. She's making me see them clearly. That landed. A tiny shift crossed Chairman Kang's face, the first real crack. And suddenly Min-jae understood something. His father was nervous. Not about the company. Not about the investigation. About Amara, which meant she mattered more than either of them realized. Min-jae's voice lowered dangerously. What did you do to her mother? The room fell silent. Chairman Kang stood slowly. You should be careful asking questions you aren't prepared to hear answered. Min-jae stepped closer. I'm done being managed by you. Then you're weaker than I thought. The words hit hard. Because all his life, weakness had been the one thing Min-jae feared becoming. Chairman Kang walked toward him calmly. You think that woman understands you? He asked softly. She only sees a wounded man she can pity. Min-jae's jaw tightened sharply. You don't know anything about her. No, his father replied. But I know men like you. That did it. Years of control. Manipulation. Silence. Something finally snapped. Min-jae grabbed his father's wrist before the older man could walk away. The entire room froze. Even the security staff near the doorway looked stunned, because Kang Min-jae had never physically challenged his father before. Ever. Chairman Kang slowly looked down at his son's hand gripping him. Then back up. Disappointment crossed his face more than anger. You've fallen in love with her. Min-jae released him instantly, but the silence answered enough. Chairman Kang smiled sadly, and somehow that expression felt colder than rage. That will destroy you. Min-jae stared at him for a long moment before replying. No, he said quietly, you did. Then he walked out. That evening, Amara sat alone inside a small cafe near the Han River, trying unsuccessfully to think clearly. Her untouched coffee had gone cold 20 minutes ago. She kept replaying everything. The documents, the guilt in Min-jae's face, the warning texts, Chairman Kang's behavior. Nothing fit together cleanly anymore, and she hated uncertainty. Her phone buzzed again. Unknown number. This time it wasn't a message. It was a photograph. Amara opened it slowly, and her entire body went cold. The image showed her mother standing beside Chairman Kang years ago. But that wasn't what shocked her. Standing partially visible in the background was a teenage Kang Min-jae. Young, thin, watching her mother with a strange softness in his eyes. Amara stared at the photo in confusion. Then another message arrived beneath it. Your mother trusted the wrong family. A third message appeared seconds later. Don't make the same mistake. Before she could process it, someone sat down across from her suddenly. Amara looked up fast and froze. It was Yoon Soo-jin. Elegant as always, perfect posture, sharp eyes. But tonight there was no fake politeness, only seriousness. Soo-jin glanced briefly at the phone in Amara's hand, then quietly said, You need to stop digging before his father notices how much you already know. Amara's heartbeat slowed dangerously. You already knew about my mother. Soo-jin looked exhausted suddenly. Not everything. Then start talking. For the first time since meeting her, Soo-jin looked genuinely unsettled. Then she leaned forward slightly and lowered her voice. Your mother wasn't just connected to Kang Group. There was a pause. She was the one person Min-jae trusted after his mother died. Amara went completely still, and before she could even process that, Soo-jin delivered the sentence that changed everything. The reason Chairman Kang fears you, she whispered, is because your mother left something behind before she died. Amara's chest tightened instantly. What? Soo-jin held her gaze carefully. Evidence. Amara stared at Soo-jin without blinking. The cafe noise faded into the background completely. Evidence of what? Soo-jin looked toward the windows first. Careful. Like even walls inside Seoul might belong to Chairman Kang. Then she leaned closer. Your mother discovered financial records connected to illegal overseas operations, bribery, cover-ups, deaths. Her voice lowered further. She was going to expose everything. Amara's throat tightened, and Chairman Kang stopped her. I don't know exactly what happened, Soo-jin admitted. But after Amara Bennett died, several company witnesses disappeared within months. A cold wave moved through Amara's body, because suddenly all the loose pieces began connecting into something horrifyingly real. Her mother hadn't died accidentally. She had been silenced. Amara swallowed hard. How do you know all this? Soo-jin gave a tired smile. You think people survive around this family without learning secrets? That felt true. Painfully true. Amara looked down at the old photograph still glowing on her phone screen. Young Min-jae standing in the background near her mother, watching quietly. Not cold, not ruthless, just lonely. Soo-jin noticed the look on Amara's face immediately. You care about him now. Amara looked up sharply. No, that wasn't convincing. It doesn't matter. Soo-jin sighed softly. That's the problem. It does matter. She hesitated briefly. You need to understand something about Min-jae. He grew up believing love was weakness. His father trained that into him for years. Amara looked away. Because she already knew. Not logically. Emotionally. You could see it in the way Min-jae struggled whenever vulnerability appeared. Like every human feeling had to fight its way through layers of control first. Soo-jin continued quietly. He trusted your mother because she treated him like a person when everyone else treated him like the chairman's heir. Amara frowned slightly. My mother knew him personally? Yes. How close? Soo-jin hesitated. Closer than his father liked. Something about that sentence sat wrong immediately. Before Amara could ask more, Soo-jin's phone buzzed. Her face changed after reading the screen. You need to leave. What? Now. The urgency in her voice wasn't fake. Amara turned instinctively toward the cafe windows and saw two black cars pulling up outside. Her stomach dropped instantly. Soo-jin stood fast. Chairman Kang's security team. How do you know? Because I've seen this before. That answer chilled her. Amara grabbed her coat immediately. What do they want? Soo-jin looked directly at her. The same thing powerful men always want. Control. Meanwhile, across the city, Min-jae was tearing through archived company files inside his private office. His tie hung loose now. Sleeves rolled up, eyes exhausted. The deeper he searched, the worse things became. Missing reports, altered payment records, deleted investigation notes. His father had buried entire histories. And right in the center of it, Amara Bennett's name kept appearing. Min-jae slammed another folder shut in frustration, because memories were starting to return now. Small things. Her smile. The way she used to sneak him candy during endless corporate dinners after his mother died. You don't have to become cruel just because everyone around you is. He had been 15, angry at the world, silent all the time. And Amara Bennett had looked at him like she saw the scared child underneath the billionaire family name. Min-jae leaned back slowly, realization hitting him harder by the second. Amara's mother had mattered to him, more than he remembered. His phone rang suddenly. One of his security staff. Yes, sir, Miss Bennett just left a cafe near the river. Chairman Kang's men were seen in the area. Min-jae stood instantly. What? We think they may be following her. Fear hit fast. Sharp. Unexpectedly sharp. Track her phone now. Yes, sir, the call ended, and for the first time in years, Kang Min-jae felt genuinely afraid. Not for himself, for her. Amara exited through the cafe's back entrance into a narrow alley behind the building. Rain hit immediately. Cold. Heavy. Soo-jin followed closely. This way. You still haven't explained why you're helping me. Soo-jin laughed softly without humor. Because I spent years loving a man who never learned how to trust anyone. She glanced briefly toward her, and somehow you made him try. The honesty caught Amara off guard. They moved quickly through the alley toward the main road. Then suddenly, a black SUV turned the corner ahead. Too fast, too deliberate. Amara stopped immediately. The rear passenger door opened. One of Chairman Kang's security men stepped out. Miss Bennett. His voice remained polite, which somehow made it more threatening. Chairman Kang wishes to speak with you. Soo-jin stepped slightly in front of Amara. She's busy. The man barely acknowledged her. Miss Bennett. Amara's pulse hammered hard now. I'm not getting into that car. The security man smiled faintly. That wasn't a request. Before anyone could react further, headlights flashed violently across the alley. Another car. Fast. A black Aston Martin stopped hard beside them, and Kang Min-jae stepped out as his eyes locked onto the security men. The entire alley changed. Tension exploded quietly, because everyone there understood something important immediately. The chairman's son had arrived. The security guards straightened subtly, not out of respect, out of uncertainty. Min-jae walked toward them slowly, dangerously calm. She said no. One guard spoke carefully. Director Kang, your father requested. I know what my father requested. His voice sharpened slightly, and I'm refusing it. The silence afterward felt electric. Amara stared at him. Rain slid down his face while he positioned himself between her and the SUV without hesitation. No calculation, no performance. Just instinct, protective instinct. The older guard lowered his voice. You shouldn't interfere. Min-jae smiled coldly. You should tell my father the same thing. Neither side moved. Then finally the guards stepped back toward the SUV. Not defeated, just cautious. Because challenging Chairman Kang's son directly carried risks too. The vehicles pulled away moments later, disappearing into the rain. Only then did Min-jae turn toward Amara fully. You okay? The concern in his voice nearly hurt more than fear itself. Amara folded her arms tightly. How did you find me? You think I'd let my father corner you alone? That answer stayed between them, heavy, real. Soo-jin quietly stepped back toward the sidewalk. I should go. Neither stopped her. Before leaving, she looked once at Min-jae. You finally chose a side. He held her gaze calmly. I should have years ago. Something sad crossed Soo-jin's face then. Not jealousy, acceptance. Then she disappeared into the rain, leaving Amara and Min-jae alone. For several seconds, neither spoke. Rain filled the silence for them. Finally, Amara looked at him carefully. You knew my mother. Min-jae exhaled slowly. Yes. Why didn't you tell me? Because I didn't remember everything until recently. That doesn't even make sense. I know. Frustration flickered across his face. She disappeared after the investigation collapsed. My father told everyone she took money and ran. Amara looked sick hearing that. He lied. Yes, the answer came instantly. Certain now. Min-jae stepped closer carefully. She used to talk to me after my mother died, he admitted quietly. I barely spoke to anyone back then. But she. He stopped briefly. She was kind to me. Amara's chest tightened painfully, because it sounded exactly like her mother. Even in grief, Lena Bennett had always made room for hurting people. Min-jae reached into his coat slowly, then held out something small, an old photograph, worn at the edges. Amara took it carefully, and her breath caught instantly. It showed a much younger Min-jae sitting beside her mother during some company dinner years ago. He couldn't have been older than 15. And for the first time, he looked happy. On the back of the photo, in her mother's handwriting, were the words, "He's lonelier than he pretends." Amara's eyes burned suddenly. Min-jae watched her quietly. She saw through me before anyone else did. The vulnerability in his voice broke something open between them. No masks now, no power games. Just two people standing in the rain carrying wounds left behind by the same monster. Then softly, almost like it slipped out unintentionally, Min-jae said, I don't want anything to happen to you. Amara looked up slowly, and there it was again. Not obsession, not ownership, love. Terrifying, unwanted, undeniable love. For a moment, neither of them moved. Rain poured around them while soul traffic blurred in the distance. Amara still held the photograph carefully in her hand. Young Min-jae beside her mother. Actually smiling. It hurt in a way she hadn't expected. Because suddenly, this entire story felt less like revenge and more like generations of broken people colliding with each other. Min-jae watched her quietly. You should come with me. Amara looked up immediately. To where? Somewhere safe. She almost laughed. Your family is the reason I need safety. I know. The honesty in that answer disarmed her again. God, she was getting tired of being disarmed by him. Min-jae stepped closer slowly, careful not to crowd her. My father thinks you have evidence. He's right. His eyes sharpened instantly. You found something? Not yet. But my mother hid something before she died. Sujin confirmed it. Min-jae went still. Then he looked away briefly like pieces were rearranging themselves inside his head. She tried to contact me before she disappeared. Amara frowned. What? He nodded slowly. I was overseas at university by then. I got one voicemail from her. His jaw tightened slightly. By the time I called back, her number was disconnected. A strange heaviness settled between them. Too many missed chances. Too many buried truths. Amara crossed her arms tightly against the cold. You really didn't know what your father was doing. Min-jae met her eyes. And this time he answered without defending himself. I knew enough to question things. I just didn't know enough to stop him. That truth hurt because it felt real. Not heroic, not clean, human. People liked pretending evil happened because nobody noticed. But most of the time, people noticed pieces, enough to feel uncomfortable. Not enough to destroy the systems feeding them. Min-jae looked exhausted suddenly. I spent years convincing myself I wasn't responsible because I didn't directly order anything. He gave a bitter laugh under his breath. Turns out silence still counts. Amara stared at him quietly, because there it was again. Not the billionaire, not the ruthless executive, just a man carrying guilt too heavy for one person. And against all logic, she wanted to comfort him. That realization scared her more than Chairman Kang ever had. A car horn echoed somewhere nearby. Reality rushed back in immediately. Min-jae looked around the empty street once before focusing on her again. You can't go home tonight. I'm not helpless. I know that. His voice softened slightly. That's why I'm worried. The way he said it made her chest ache unexpectedly. No control in his tone, no arrogance, just concern, and somehow that felt far more intimate. Amara hesitated briefly before nodding once. Fine. Min-jae took her to a private penthouse overlooking the Han River. Not his main home. This place felt different, smaller, quieter, less performative. No gold decorations, no giant portraits, no cold museum atmosphere. Just dim lights, bookshelves, and windows overlooking the city. Amara stepped inside slowly. This is yours? Min-jae removed his wet coat. It's where I go when I can't stand my own life. That answer lingered. She looked around again, noticing details she never expected from him. Old vinyl records, half-finished books, a piano near the windows. You play when I can't sleep. She glanced at him carefully, so every night. A tired smile touched his face briefly. Almost. For a second, things felt strangely normal, dangerously normal. Min-jae walked into the kitchen. You should eat something. I'm not hungry. That wasn't a question. Amara blinked once. There he is. What? The controlling billionaire again. To her surprise, he actually laughed softly, low and rough and real. You bring that version out of me less than everyone else does. The honesty of that settled warmly somewhere inside her chest, which was unfortunate timing considering she still technically wanted to resent him. Min-jae handed her a mug of tea. Their fingers brushed briefly. Tiny contact. But the tension it created felt immediate. Both noticed it. Neither acknowledged it. Amara looked away first. So what now? Min-jae leaned against the kitchen counter quietly. Now we figure out what your mother left behind before my father finds it first. And if we do find it, his expression hardened slightly. Then everything changes. Meanwhile, Chairman Kang stood inside his office at the estate staring at an old photograph of his late wife. One of his security men entered carefully. Director Kang intervened tonight. I know. He took Miss Bennett with him. Chairman Kang remained silent for several seconds. Then finally, love makes intelligent men predictable. The guard hesitated. What should we do? Chairman Kang set the photograph down carefully. Nothing yet. But sir, my son has spent his entire life avoiding emotional attachment. His expression darkened slightly. If he's finally allowed himself to care about someone. A pause. That weakness will eventually make him careless. The security guard lowered his head. Yes, Chairman. After the man left, Chairman Kang slowly walked toward the windows overlooking Seoul. Rain still covered the city, and for the first time in years, he looked uneasy. Because Lena Bennett had once almost destroyed everything. And now her daughter had entered his son's life at the exact moment old secrets were beginning to resurface. It felt too familiar, too dangerous. Around 2 in the morning, Amara couldn't sleep. She wandered quietly through the penthouse until she noticed soft piano music drifting from the living room. Min-jae sat alone near the windows playing slowly. Not perfectly, but emotionally. The city lights reflected around him while his fingers moved across the keys, with a kind of sadness that only appeared when nobody was watching. Amara stopped in the hallway silently, and suddenly she understood something painful. Kang Min-jae had been lonely for a very, very long time. The song ended softly. Without turning around, he spoke. "You're staring." Amara crossed her arms. "You're awake. I told you, I don't sleep much." She walked closer slowly. "You're better at piano than I expected. I'm bad at compliments." That wasn't one. A faint smile appeared briefly on his face, then faded again. Amara leaned lightly against the piano. "What was your mother like?" The question caught him off guard. He looked down at the keys for a long moment before answering. "Warm." His voice softened slightly. She laughed loudly. "My father hated that." Amara listened quietly. She used to sing while cooking, even though she was terrible at it. Another small smile. The staff would suffer through it politely. The tenderness in his voice nearly broke her heart. Because people didn't talk like that about someone they'd stopped grieving. Min-jae looked up at her finally. "Your mother?" Amara swallowed slowly. She made everywhere feel safe. Her eyes lowered briefly. "Even when things were bad financially. Somehow she never let me feel poor." Emotion thickened her throat unexpectedly. She used to dance while cleaning the apartment. A quiet laugh escaped her. Terribly. Now Min-jae smiled too. Soft, real. And suddenly they were no longer billionaire heir and suspicious employee. Just two grieving children sitting in the middle of the night missing women who had loved them well. The intimacy of that realization settled heavily between them. Neither looked away. Then quietly, almost without thinking, Min-jae asked, "If things were different, would you still hate me?" The question landed directly in her chest. Amara held his gaze. "I don't hate you now." Silence. Sharp silence, because that changed everything. Min-jae stood slowly from the piano bench. Neither moved closer, but the air shifted anyway. Heavy, breathless. His voice dropped softer now. "You should." Amara's heart beat painfully hard. "You keep deciding how I feel for me. That's because I know what I deserve." "No," she whispered. "You know what your father taught you." Something cracked visibly inside him at that. Years of emotional armor suddenly looking fragile under one sentence. Min-jae stepped toward her carefully. Close enough now that she could see exhaustion in his eyes. Close enough to feel warmth beneath the tension. Amara. Her name sounded dangerous coming from him now. Not because of power. Because of feeling. Real feeling. And for one terrifying second, she wanted to kiss him. The realization hit both of them at once. You could see it. In the silence. In the way he looked at her mouth briefly before catching himself. In the way her breathing changed. But before either could move, a phone rang sharply across the room. The moment shattered instantly. Min-jae cursed softly under his breath and grabbed the phone from the table. His expression changed immediately after seeing the caller. Then worse after answering. What happened? His entire body stiffened. When? Amara's stomach tightened instantly. Min-jae lowered the phone slowly. "What is it?" For the first time since she met him, he looked genuinely shaken. Then quietly he said, "Someone broke into your apartment." Amara felt the blood drain from her face. "What?" Min-jae was already grabbing his coat again. "The building manager called my security team. Your apartment was trashed." Her stomach twisted violently. Was anything taken? They don't know yet. But both of them already understood. This wasn't robbery. This was a warning. Or worse, a search. The drive across Seoul felt endless. Neither spoke much. Rain hammered the windshield while tension filled every inch of the car. Amara stared ahead quietly, trying to prepare herself for what she might find. But deep down, she already knew. Chairman Kang was escalating. And dangerous men only escalated when they felt threatened. When they reached her apartment building, 2 security officers stood near the entrance. Min-jae moved first. Fast, controlled, furious. The apartment door hung partially broken when they entered. Furniture overturned. Drawers ripped open. Glass shattered across the floor. Amara stopped breathing for a second. Because grief lived here. Her mother's photograph. Her old letters. The tiny pieces of her life she had rebuilt quietly after years of loss. And somebody had violated all of it. Min-jae looked around slowly, jaw clenched hard enough to hurt. One security officer spoke carefully. Whoever did this knew what they were looking for. Amara moved through the wreckage numbly, then suddenly froze. Her mother's old jewelry box sat open on the floor near the couch. She frowned immediately, because nothing valuable had ever been inside. Only photographs, old receipts, random keepsakes. Her heartbeat slowed. No, not random. Amara knelt quickly and lifted the false velvet bottom her mother once showed her as a child. Empty. Her chest tightened sharply. Something had been hidden there. Something important. Min-jae noticed her expression instantly. What is it? Amara looked up slowly. She left something here. The room went silent. She hid evidence in this box. One of the security officers muttered under his breath. Damn. Amara's mind raced. If Chairman Kang's people tore the apartment apart tonight, then they believed the evidence was here too. Which meant, maybe they hadn't found it. Min-jae crouched beside her. Are you sure? Yes. She swallowed hard. My mother used to tell me some things should stay hidden until the right person is ready to see them. Min-jae's eyes shifted toward the empty compartment. She was protecting something. No, Amara whispered. She was protecting someone. And suddenly, a memory surfaced, so suddenly it almost physically hurt. Her mother years ago, laughing softly while packing old books into storage boxes after moving apartments. If anything ever happens to me, the truth is with the music. Amara stood instantly. The piano. Min-jae looked confused. My mother's piano, the storage facility, sat on the edge of the city, old, quiet, nearly empty at that hour. Min-jae insisted on coming inside with her, despite her arguments. I'm not letting you walk into this alone. The softness in his voice made resistance difficult. Inside the unit sat old furniture covered in white sheets, boxes, photo albums, pieces of another life, and against the far wall, the piano. Dust covered most of it now. Amara approached slowly, emotions climbing painfully into her throat. Her mother used to play every Sunday morning while cooking breakfast. Even after the illness started. Even after the debts piled up. Music had been the one thing grief never took from her. Amara pressed one piano key gently. A soft, broken note echoed through the storage room. Then she noticed it. One key slightly higher than the others. Min-jae saw it too. Without speaking, he carefully lifted the panel beneath the keyboard, and there it was. A sealed envelope. Amara's hands shook immediately. Her mother's handwriting covered the front. For the person who finally stops him. Silence swallowed the room. Amara could barely breathe as she opened it. Inside were photographs, financial records, audio transcripts, and one flash drive. Min-jae stared at the documents beside her, face slowly hardening with horror. Because the evidence didn't just expose corruption, it exposed murder. Illegal contracts tied directly to overseas worker deaths, witness payments, threats. And then, Amara found the final page. Her eyes locked onto the words instantly, then widened. What? Min-jae stepped closer. She handed him the document silently. It was a signed internal statement from years ago, a confession. Not from Chairman Kang, from someone else. Min-jae's expression changed immediately after reading the name. No, Amara's voice barely came out. Your mother. The statement revealed that Min-jae's mother had discovered the corruption first, not Lena Bennett, and before her death, she had been preparing to testify publicly against her husband. Chairman Kang knew. Everything suddenly connected. The suicide, the cover-ups, the silence afterward. Min-jae stared at the paper like the ground beneath him had vanished. She tried to expose him. Amara looked at him carefully. And your father killed her for it. The sentence shattered something inside him. He turned away abruptly, one hand against his mouth now, breathing unevenly. Not crying, but close. Years. Years of guilt and confusion and emotional manipulation, suddenly collapsing under the weight of truth. Amara's chest ached watching him, because no matter how powerful he looked, this was still the little boy who lost his mother and spent decades blaming himself for surviving her. Min-jae laughed once suddenly. Broken, disbelieving. She died trying to stop him, and I spent half my life becoming exactly like him. No, Amara said softly. He looked at her sharply. You're nothing like him. You don't know that. I do. The certainty in her voice hit harder than comfort would have. Min-jae looked wrecked suddenly. Humanly wrecked. All this time, he whispered, he made me think she abandoned me. Amara stepped closer carefully. She didn't. His eyes shut briefly. And when he finally looked at her again, there was no billionaire left in his expression. Only grief. Raw grief. Then quietly he asked, what do we do now? Amara looked down at the evidence in her hands. The answer should felt victorious. Instead, it felt heavy. Because exposing Chairman Kang wouldn't just destroy a corporation. It would destroy an entire family. A legacy. A lifetime of lies. But then she thought about her mother. About Min-jae's mother. About all the people buried underneath powerful men protecting themselves. and her voice steadied. We finish it. The shareholders' meeting 2 days later became the most important event in Kang Group history. Media crowded outside the building before sunrise. Executives whispered nervously in hallways. Nobody understood why emergency board members had suddenly been summoned. But everyone felt the tension. Inside a private conference room upstairs, Amara adjusted the sleeve of her top quietly. Min-jae stood near the windows overlooking Seoul. Still, silent, but different now. Not cold, focused. He turned toward her slowly. Once this starts, there's no undoing it. I know. My father will try to destroy both of us. Amara gave a small tired smile. He already tried that. For the first time in days, something softer touched his expression. Then he walked toward her slowly. So why are you still here? The question lingered heavily between them, because they both knew he wasn't talking about the company anymore. Amara looked up at him carefully, because somewhere along the way, her voice softened. You stopped being the man I came to hate. Something emotional flickered openly across his face then. No hiding it this time, no walls left. Min-jae reached for her hand slowly, like he was still surprised she might allow it. When their fingers intertwined, the room went quiet around them. Simple touch. But it carried everything neither of them knew how to say yet. Then softly, almost like a confession, he murmured, You were the first person who ever made me want to become better instead of stronger. Amara's eyes burned instantly. Because that was love. Not obsession, not possession. Transformation. Real transformation. And before either of them could speak again, the conference room doors opened. One of the board members stepped inside nervously. They're ready for you. Min-jae's expression hardened again slightly, but this time it wasn't the cold mask from before. This time it looked like resolve. He looked once more at Amara. Then together, they walked toward the meeting that would either free them or destroy them both. The boardroom was already full when they entered. Executives, investors, lawyers, media representatives. Dozens of conversations died instantly the moment Kang Min-jae walked in beside Amara, because nobody missed what had changed. Not the way he stayed close to her. Not the way she no longer looked afraid. Not the tension tightening the entire room. And seated at the far end of the table, Chairman Kang, calm as ever. Like none of this could possibly touch him. His eyes moved first to Min-jae, then to Amara, and for a brief second, something cold passed through them, not anger, disappointment, like a man watching two people choose destruction willingly. Chairman Kang folded his hands together. You called an emergency session without authorization. Min-jae remained standing. I had authorization. Several board members shifted uncomfortably. The chairman gave a faint smile. From whom? From the truth. The room fell silent immediately. Chairman Kang leaned back slowly. You've become dramatic. No, Min-jae replied calmly. I've become honest. Amara watched the room carefully. Executives looked nervous already, because everybody inside Kang Group had spent years surviving by pretending not to notice things. And deep down, they all knew exactly what kind of man Chairman Kang really was. Min-jae placed the flash drive onto the conference table. This company buried illegal operations for years. Whispers spread instantly. Chairman Kang didn't react. The evidence says otherwise. Min-jae's voice sharpened slightly. The evidence includes financial records, witness statements, internal threats, and proof of bribery connected to worker deaths overseas. One investor stood abruptly. What is this? Chairman Kang finally spoke again. A performance. But for the first time since meeting him, Amara noticed uncertainty in his eyes. Tiny, almost invisible. But there. Min-jae looked directly at his father. You murdered my mother. The entire room stopped breathing. One woman near the back actually gasped aloud. Chairman Kang's expression darkened slightly for the first time all morning. You should think carefully before making emotional accusations. She left testimony. That changed everything. Chairman Kang went completely still, and suddenly everyone understood. It was true. Min-jae picked up one document from the table. She discovered the overseas corruption and planned to expose you publicly. His voice tightened slightly. 2 weeks later, she died. Silence crushed the room. Chairman Kang stood slowly now, and somehow his calmness felt more frightening than rage. You're humiliating your family for a woman. Min-jae laughed softly, but there was no warmth in it. No, he said quietly. I'm saving myself from becoming you. That landed hard. Even the board members felt it. Chairman Kang's eyes shifted toward Amara finally. This is what your mother wanted? He asked coldly. Revenge? Amara met his gaze steadily. My mother wanted truth. Chairman Kang smiled faintly. Truth destroys people. No, Amara answered softly. People destroy people. For the first time, the chairman looked old. Not weak, not defeated, just tired. Like decades of manipulation were finally collapsing under their own weight. But then his expression hardened again, and suddenly he looked directly at Min-jae. "You think exposing me will free you?" His voice lowered. "You were still part of all this." The words hit exactly where he intended. Several board members looked toward Min-jae immediately, because that part was true too. Min-jae had signed documents, approved operations, protected the company. Pain crossed his face briefly, but this time he didn't run from it. "Yes," he said quietly. "I was." The room stilled again. Amara looked at him sharply. Because that answer took courage. Real courage. Min-jae continued, "I spent years pretending I wasn't responsible because I didn't create the system." His jaw tightened. "But benefiting from corruption while staying silent still makes you guilty." Nobody spoke. Because nobody expected honesty from men like him. Not real honesty. Chairman Kang's eyes narrowed slightly. "You're willing to destroy yourself too?" Min-jae looked at his father for a long moment, then. "If that's what accountability costs." And that was the moment everything changed. Not because the evidence mattered most. Because people finally believed him. Because for the first time in his life, Kang Min-jae stopped protecting power and started protecting truth. Chairman Kang saw it too. You could feel it. The control he spent decades building was slipping. Not financially, emotionally. The room no longer feared him the same way. One board member slowly stood. Then another. Questions erupted immediately. When did leadership know about this? We need external investigators. Who approved these operations? Lawyers started speaking over each other. Media phones lit up across the room. And Chairman Kang finally realized something terrible. He could no longer control the narrative. Security entered minutes later. Not for Min-jae, for him. The lead investigator approached carefully. "Chairman Kang, we need you to come with us." The room went silent again. Chairman Kang looked around slowly at the empire he spent his entire life building, then finally at his son. And when he spoke again, his voice sounded strangely human, almost regretful. "You love her," he murmured. Min-jae held his gaze calmly. "Yes." The older man's eyes shifted briefly toward Amara. Then back to his son. "That made you weak." Min-jae's expression softened slightly. "No," he said quietly. "It made me stop being afraid." The words landed like final judgment. Security escorted Chairman Kang toward the exit while cameras exploded outside the building. And for the first time in decades, Kang Group's most powerful man looked small. Not because he lost money. Because he lost control. 3 months later, Seoul looked different in winter. Cleaner somehow. The media storm surrounding Kang Group had become international news. Executives resigned. Investigations spread. Families of overseas victims received compensation. And Kang Min-jae shocked everyone by stepping down temporarily during the restructuring process. People expected him to fight for power. Instead, he cooperated fully, publicly, honestly, which confused the public almost as much as the scandal itself. Meanwhile, Amara stood inside a newly renovated cultural center near the Han River, adjusting framed photographs along the walls. The Amara Bennett Foundation, built to support immigrant workers and families harmed by corporate exploitation. Her mother's name finally stood for something truthful again. A soft voice behind her said, "You hung that one crooked." Amara smiled before even turning around. "You're becoming annoying." Min-jae walked closer holding 2 coffees. Less polished now. Still handsome. Still powerful. But softer around the edges somehow. More human. He handed her 1 coffee carefully. Their fingers lingered together naturally this time. No hesitation anymore. No fear. He looked around the foundation quietly. She would love this place. Amara's chest tightened warmly. "I think so too." They stood together silently for a moment, watching late afternoon snowfall outside the windows. Peaceful silence. The kind neither of them used to know how to survive. Then Min-jae reached into his coat pocket slowly. "I found something while cleaning out my mother's old things." He handed her a folded piece of paper. Amara opened it carefully, and immediately recognized her mother's handwriting. Her breath caught. "What is this, a letter? To who?" Min-jae's eyes softened. "To me." Amara unfolded the aging paper slowly. And there, near the bottom, written years before either of them understood any of this, were the words, "Protect the woman who refuses to fear you. She will remind you who you are when the world tries to turn you cold." Amara looked up slowly, emotion filling her eyes instantly. "She wrote this years ago." Min-jae nodded once. "She knew you before I did." A tear finally slipped down Amara's cheek. Not from sadness, from the unbearable beauty of realizing some connections begin long before people understand them. Min-jae stepped closer carefully. Still careful with her heart even now, always careful. "You changed my life," he said softly. Amara shook her head gently. No, her fingers intertwined with his. "We saved each other." And this time, when he kissed her, there was no power struggle left between them, no control, no fear, no revenge. Just two wounded people finally learning what love feels like when nobody is trying to own the other. Outside, snow continued falling quietly over Seoul. And for the first time in a very long time, both of them felt free. And that was the moment Amara finally understood something her mother tried to teach her years ago. Some people enter your life to love you. Others enter your life to change you. But once in a lifetime, someone does both. Kang Min-jae started this story as a man who controlled everything around him because he was terrified of feeling anything at all. And Amara, she walked into his life carrying her own grief, her own anger, her own scars, yet somehow became the one person strong enough to remind him he was still human. Not through fear, not through submission, not through money, but through truth, through honesty, through love that refused to shrink itself. And honestly, that's what makes this story hurt in the best way. Because underneath the billion-dollar empire, the scandals, the betrayal, the revenge, this was really a story about two lonely people teaching each other how to heal. So if this story touched you even a little, if you felt their pain, if you smiled for them at the end, or if you believe love should feel safe instead of controlling, then don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and tell me in the comments. At what moment did you realize Min-jae was truly in love with Amara? Was it the rain? The piano? The apartment break-in? Or the moment he finally chose truth over power? I'll be reading every comment. And until the next story, take care of your heart.